Critical Blast. Where pop culture gets blasted.
My name is Barry Allen, and I am the fastest man alive. When I was a child, I saw my mother killed by something impossible. My father went to prison for her murder. Then an accident made me the impossible. To the outside world, I'm an ordinary forensic scientist, but secretly, I use my speed to fight crime and find others like me. And one day, I'll find who killed my mother and get justice for my father. I am the Flash.
And that's where it began 6-7 years ago, leading up to what was probably one of the more exciting superhero shows that came on television since Adam West joined us on Batman. And I'm going to shut the video off now because it's playing in my ears while I'm talking. It was not supposed to do that. Every once in a while, one day I'm going to become a professional at this, folks. You're just going to have to sit here and watch me fumble along until that happens. Anyway, The Flash has got tons of fans, and none of them are bigger, and I mean that in the passion sense, of course, than David Taylor II here, who runs the fastest podcast on the internet, Flash Chat. And we've got a link to his channel pinned to the top of the comments there. We hope that you'll check that out. Give that a subscribe, get that subscriber base built up here. And we welcome to the show, David. How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I just watched the latest episode of The Flash last night on that CW app. I feel like I just watched last season finally wrap up.
Those first 3 episodes were supposed to be the last 3 episodes of last season. Danielle Panabaker said that. So because of the pandemic, because
I knew they got cut short.
Yeah, they got cut short, but that was the end of the Eva McCulloch Mirror Monarch arc.
What are your thoughts on that way that ended? Because I felt kind of let down. I mean, the whole the whole Care Bear stare kind of victory at the end there. That's all just. I don't have the power. Here, hold my hand. And what power do you have over mirror creatures that you can?
It's there's not really a nice way to say it, so I will try to say it as succinctly as possible, but it's still going to be brutal. The honest truth is the show has kind of been spinning in circles since, I'll give them season 4, but from season 5 until now, because there are no new beats. There are no new plot points. There are no new developments. And I mean, the show could have been so much more. What I always hoped was that we would get a mentor. Everybody thought it was going to be Jay Garrick. If it's not going to be Jay Garrick, then he had Thawne, but Thawne, of course, was for nefarious purposes. And then I thought that at some point they were going to bring in Max Mercury, because this show is not about the growth of its protagonist. That's what makes it so maddening.
Yeah, because Barry is pretty much now the expert on everything, and the answer to everything is always Iris. So
right, then there's that whole thing too. Is really kind of, after this last episode, it's really kind of Felicity 2.0 at this point.
Yeah, it is,
because she's a touchstone. So it's like, what needs to happen? Well, Eva needs to have someone that can out control her mirror TK. Iris can do that. Well, yes. Barry needs someone who can organically restore his speed force. Well, Iris can do that. Eva needs someone to help her repower so she can kill all her evil twins. Well, Iris can do that.
So Iris is the panacea of the entire series.
That's
And
what
was this about an organic thing for the artificial Speed Force? Was Wells not a real human being? I mean, he was the organic source. And I thought for a while there that, yes, we saw the Tom Cavanaugh character die. We're like, yes, that takes care of all of them. We'll never see him again. But remember how the Speed Force always manifested to Barry as his mother. Whenever he was in there, he would talk with Nora Allen. I thought, what a perfect way for Tom Cavanaugh to continue to come back by being the communal avatar of the new Speed Force.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
they didn't do it. I mean, I think that we got original Wells. I think that's cool. If you notice with this last episode, they're not explaining it. They're explaining words, the absence of all the other Wells and the coalescence of all the original Wells. How? Exactly how? And so they don't explain that. And
multiversal magic.
Right. It's magic on a show that's based on science. And Iris comes out of her coma, and once again, she's a touchstone. They don't explain that.
Nope.
And they don't really explain what was the seal. Just Cecile, Mirror Cecile was looking kind of minute, and I guess Joe, like he was trying to surrender himself to his fate. Maybe he just accepted that, that this is it or whatever, and then it's not. So the only thing that I thought was somewhat clever is how they're going to replace Hartley Sawyer. I mean, we called it last year. We're like, if they keep elongated man, they're going to have him have some kind of accident and come back as a different person, which is exactly what's going to happen, exactly what happened. But, at least that's keeping the character if they had to cancel the actor. But other than that, was there a beat we haven't seen before? Barry loses his speed. They got to find him, and we only know it's the real Barry because he's crying.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, he's weeping. Yes, that's definitely Barry.
That's the real Barry, right?
And now, that's another repeat beat that we've seen in the CW in general. On Supergirl, when Brainiac 5 went full Brainiac. In season 4, when the Thinker, went full Thinker, and of course now last week when Barry was full intellect. The CW has this slant where if you are really, really smart, you have no emotional touch points to play with.
Well, true. And I think that because this episode was so much about emphasizing that Barry was the paragon of love, which was his crisis title, but it was Iris all along. This is why I'm always talking about reading the comics, because they don't have any original ideas, because that "You're My Lightning Rod" thing, as all us comic readers know, that's Wally and Linda.
Yes.
Right. The Speed Force originated during Wade's run with Wally West, and Wally is the Flash for a lot of people because Barry was dead in 85's Crisis, and so Wally kind of ascended and actually exceeded his mentor, and so they established Wally and Linda as the Flash couple. But that's their line. When Wally was wrong with the and losing himself, he needed something to draw him back. That's their line. That's their thing. And so Marion said in Spider-Man 3, that upside down kiss, that was our kiss. Right. Even though Spidey kissed Gwen like that, Mary Jane was like, no, that was our kiss. So this is like the Wally West Linda Park thing. So I'm like, once again, there's not any new ideas. They're recycling the same thing. If you think about it, somebody's in a coma every year. Barry loses his speed every year. And they emphasize that he can't think his way out of his problems. He's got to feel his way out. He's got to heart his way out.
And the villain is always faster than him, even when it's Mirror Monarch. She was, because of subluminal light speed waves coming off mirrors, she's faster than Barry. It's like
right.
Barry
So,
runs at light speed and goes through time. There's no way she's faster than him.
right. So that was another one. But once again, once we get into, you have to accept a certain level of suspension of disbelief because we're using superhero science. But
Right.
once we even stop caring about cohesion in the superhero science, then sky's the limit. Because if it's just magic, if it can just happen because the story needs it to, then, and that's the one thing that always amazes me about writers who go that way. Because once you go that way, clearly you don't understand that you undermine any type of cognitive connection to your material because your brain rejects it on a subconscious level.
Yeah. It's become, even with the John Wesley Ship series, which was great. I mean, for when we had it, that was super. Looking
Yes.
back on it, we can see the flaws because of the technology and the the styles and the fashions of the time. It's outdated, but every single episode he had a job to do as a CSI, as a police scientist, and he lived in a little apartment. He wasn't our Barry now. After the first season, he's been given Star Labs. I mean, his name is on the deed, which means he's either got a ton of money, which apparently he does, because that's a really nice apartment he's renting on a police person's salary, or he's completely bankrupt because everybody should have sued Star Labs into oblivion, and he's the owner.
That's right. And also, again, there's a lot of real world elements that we keep skipping over. The fact that Caitlin Snow is still a felon, she's still wanted. And number one, and number two, all of that should be invalidated if Harrison Wells is back. Don't you remember that Eobard Thawne Wells got on camera and confessed to a whole bunch of crimes, and that's how Barry got everything going in his name or whatever. So if real Wells is back, they won't be able to prove that that was Thawne Wells. And so he's still a wanted man by some. And then that also invalidates a whole lot of things, because the only thing that makes a will valid is the death of the testator. So if you're not dead, then none of that is real.
And of course, he's not going to die until he's 92. We know that now.
Right.
And I don't know if you caught this or not, but we have a time traveling H.G. Wells.
Yes.
I thought that was a nice nod to the whole genre there. You think we're going to see him again? I mean, he's a time traveler, so he's got to come back, right?
I think we will. I mean, it's funny. He's the only character that they seem to put some effort into making something new happen every season. If you kind of observe like what he does, he gets a new spin because Nash was in Indiana Jones Wells.
Yeah.
And now we have Doctor Who Wells, basically.
Yes. I mean, I was fine with, okay, there's so much about Wells that irritates me. First, I was fine with that first season Wells. I'm like, okay, well, that's actually Thawne, and he's changed his face to look like Wells, and he's going to change it back to look like himself later on when he becomes, the blonde-haired Eobard Thawne. And then, you get Earth 2 Wells. Okay, they're almost identical. They're the same character. But then when you start getting into this, Orson Welles and Sherlock Wells and all these crazy parodies, so to speak, it just got silly to me. The one thing that wasn't even Flash related, this is going to go back to Crisis, or prior to Crisis. Eobard Thawne was seen in Legends of Tomorrow, and he was played by not Tom Cavanaugh. And then we see him in Flash, and he's played by Tom Cavanaugh. I'm like, Why did Eobard Thawne decide to go back to using a face that he's not trying to hide under anymore?
Right. No real cohesion between the shows. But the other thing is, like I said, if you just have the main protagonist keep hitting the same beats or basically going around in circles, then the other characters become a little bit more interesting than him. And so this last thing made me feel like, honestly, it was an Iris and a Wells show guest starring Barry, because Iris can do everything that she does better than the original person. So she's got better mirror powers than Eva, which makes no sense in the universe. And she had Speed Force powers for a day or two, and now all of a sudden she's a Speed Force master. And they were like, and Nora's lightning was, yellow and purple. And so it's like, why are we watching this show? Like, what Barry doesn't learn anything. Barry's going to run first, ask questions later. And I am also tired of Run Barry Run. It was cool in the first season when we first heard it, but now every time there's a moment, somebody's saying Run Barry Run. And I'm like, I'm a little tired of that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, use it sparingly, because when you use it sparingly and you hear it again, it has the callback and it has the impact to it. But yeah, doing it all the time is just it's weakening it, it's cheapening it. But Barry doesn't have to learn anything, David. I mean, Barry is, as we saw in the Speed Think episode, that's not speed learning. You're not just he wasn't just thinking ahead. He knew things about quantum physics and all these mechanics. Like you're a CSI. You know how to detect blood spatter and detect chemicals in a residue if you run it through an oscilloscope or whatever. But he's outthinking Cisco, who is a went to school for a long time to become this doctor level genius mechanical engineer person. You can't just look at the board and think ahead of him. You don't know the stuff to think of. But that's speed thinking became speed geniusing.
Well, first of all, that whole thing was a misnomer, because what Barry was actually doing was doing what Dr. Strange was doing, which was probability calculating. I don't know why they tried to sell that as speed thinking or whatever, because that's not what he was doing. What he was literally doing was seeing the future before it happened. He was also calculating every possible choice and scenario and coming with the one that would work, which is what Dr. Strange did. That's premonition, that's probability at hyperspeeds, and then having a knowledge, and this is very much a TV trope, where if you can do one kind of science, you can do all the science.
Oh, yes. It's the sciencing. Yes.
Right. And the only one that I won't say they stick to it. I said they've been better with Caitlin sticking to the medical doctor part, because they made Cisco a Uber inventor a long time ago. And
yes, although he's done his bit of medical, and because he came up with the cure for the metagene.
Right.
Hey, Chris, thanks for stopping by, man.
But he made that gold gun. Who doesn't love that gold gun?
Yeah, that's true. Chris T. Hiroshek in the chat here, by the way, was just on a chat the other day. His crowdfunded comic book hit goal, and as promised on a live stream, his wife shaved his 13-inch locks off to give to kids with cancer. So hats off to you, man, and a cold head. But thank you, appreciate that.
Commitment right there. I couldn't do that, but okay.
Well, they don't want mine either. But yeah, now here's the other thing too. The Flash doesn't have any villains left that are any good. Every villain that he had that was good, they blew it up in the first season, and everybody knows who he is. I miss the old, Captain Cold is back in town, and he's going to rob this bank, and he's got this brand new gimmick thing that he's going to pull off with it. Or, you know, the heat wave is hired by some mobster to burn down buildings on the waterfront, but, you know, he's got a trick up his sleeve for the Flash. One and done episodes, there's a lot to be said for them. We're getting one and done seasons, and it's like, you know, you're dragging it out. You're extrapolating the story far beyond what really needs to be done.
Well, that was one of the things I cautioned against in the first season, because I realized, even though that first season was golden, I loved it. It wasn't perfect, but I don't care about the flaws because it was so good otherwise, because it did so many things right. But one of the things that I kind of knew they were doing was that they were burning through story too fast. And I said, the only way, you can't have Barry wake up after 9 months, which is a pregnancy season, in a coma, and then in a very short amount of time, max out his powers. So in the first season, they had more of a handle on that. Because like if you remember the very first episode, when he has to run fast enough to create the funnel, he's not sure, and that's when he gets his first pep talk. So I thought they were going to handle, and you have to call Cisco, how fast do I have to run to do this? So I thought they had a bit of a handle on it. But then as time went on, I'm like, you can't quantum leap his speed, because remember, when he comes back from the speed, he walks into the Speed Force and says bye. When we come back, Iris is the field commander. Then he comes out of the Speed Force, disoriented and, you know, writing on a chalkboard, but there's no explanation. Now he's just super fast. But also, it's always been a challenge once you get past the Silver Age with the Flash in the comics, as to how do you give him a challenge, because he is by definition overpowered. And the other thing that seriously bothered me is how they made Savitar a Transformer. I'm like, did you read the comic? Do you know who Savitar is? He's the perfect foil. If Wade didn't invent anything else, just inventing Savitar was worth the price of admission. And I'm like, what they did with him on the show, I'm like, no, they could have done the evil twin story. They could have done a Transformer Speedster and then not be Savitar, and they could have brought in the real Savitar. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's no escalation if you're already fast enough to run through time. Where do you go from there? You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I read a lot of fun Flash stories in the 70s, and he was already time traveling, but, you know, he needed that cosmic treadmill. He didn't just, you know, take off running, because there wasn't a strip long enough for him to get going on to get that kind of speed. You have to have a treadmill of some kind. And by the way, there's a meme in the making here that I've been wanting to put together, and I've just never done it. It's basically, you know, Euclid saying, you know, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and then, you know, Aristotle, or the next guy who did 3D geometry, coming out and saying, no, the great circle is oftentimes the you know, not a straight line between 2 points. And then just that picture from the Flash, just like, you know, hold my beer. Because he never, it's like, you know, there's a fire on the waterfronts, Barry, go put it out. Okay, well, the waterfront's that way. I'm going to run this big zigzag line here. It's like, just go straight there. What's the deal with this? It looks cool, but it's not functional.
That's very true about the zigzag line. And also, the other thing is with the way he does stuff. Another thing, because they finally got around to the ring, but the ring is not really the ring, because we don't see his costume come out of it enough. Yeah. But this is what happens when you don't use Flash facts. So if you know anything about the Flash from the comics, you understand that what Barry did, because Savitar was an extreme version of Barry, and the best villains are always some reflection of the hero. But what Barry Allen in the comics does is he actually studies speed. He learns how to use it tactically, but he masters the physics of speed. And so when you do that, then you give the character room to create some new scenarios, because they've learned something new about speed, which is brilliant when you have a character who's kind of overpowered, because there's some room to play with some things there. But when you don't have Flash facts and Barry's not actually learning something new about his speed, every year. He's just doing the same thing. He loses it, then he gets it back in some kind of miracle way, but it's not defined and all that. Then once again,
Well, the fact that he can give it up in the first place is stupid. You can't just that'd be like me, giving up my sense of smell. You can't just put it in the bottle and say, "Here, you take it now." It's part of you.
Maybe we can touch somebody and get some hair back about that.
But yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
but they OP'd him already because it's not once they OP'd him with speed, and he just they're like, we got him, we maxed out his speed. What else can we do? They had to give him new abilities that he never had in the comic book. So now he can throw electricity. Like,
right.
He's not Electro. He's not the Electrocutioner. He's the Flash. He's fast. There's nothing electrical about this guy. If he wants to do something electrical, he's going to get a whole, he's going to get 300 yards of copper wire, and he's going to run it real fast around a pole, and he's going to yank on it, and he's going to have electricity.
Right. Right. They gave Captain Marvel the power to hurl lightning, which always made sense. It was stupid for him not to have that power, although I do like his lightning strike that he developed in Kingdom Come.
Yes.
But that makes sense for that character. But the coolest thing this Flash has ever done is when he vibrated that whole train.
Yes.
And saving people. That's the coolest thing he's ever done. And so when you don't focus on his vibrational powers or his Speed Force abilities, what Wally could do was lend speed and steal speed. Also, what Thawne did, which Barry eventually learned how to do, was create speed mirages. That's always a cool power. There's about, because I looked it up, there's about 15 abilities that the Speed Force granted that was beyond, we just run fast. Right. And it was always interesting to see Wally develop this new power. And what was also interesting about Dead Heat and Terminal Velocity was that they began to treat the Speed Force like a religion, and some believed and some didn't. So Max Mercury was like a priest, and Johnny Quick was an unbeliever until the end.
Yeah.
And his daughter, kind of had to make up her own mind. I thought that was a fascinating way to approach what was powering the speedsters and when you were ready to go home and that whole thing. But that's kind of been a jumbled mess too. That's not like a really clear thing now, because the Speed Force became the Q continuum and then it died. I'm like, wait. So now we have a artificial Speed Force machine that we just found out can actually get powered, by residual Speed Force that was in Iris.
Yeah. So the Speed Force never died. Now we've got two Speed Forces, and for all we know, they built the Speed Force that Eobard Thawne is going to reverse and have his own artificial Speed Force.
Now, that's another thing. The whole premise of their relationship on the show, and also in the comics, but definitely on the show, was that Thawne needed Barry to become Barry so that Barry could tap into the Speed Force, so Thawne could create the reverse Speed Force so he could actually get his powers and exist.
Yes.
So at some point, if like in the comics, if you're going to detach him from that and take him outside of time, that needs to be a very clear thing that happens. But the problem with that is that we had Nora. So Nora's whole arc was, I keep screwing up stuff in the past, and that keeps reflecting in the future. And then the final resolution was, the only thing is for me to not exist. So if you're going to butterfly affect this whole thing, if that's going to be your way of dealing, then, but once again, it's like you keep changing the rules every year. So
and they still haven't done what would be a really good story if they wanted to have something dramatic, and really get into the feelings of everybody. What they should have this season, or very soon at least, is Barry's not Barry's first encounter with Thawne, but Thawne's first encounter with Barry. Because remember, they're meeting each other out of synchronicity. So at some point, there's going to be Thawne Prime, who doesn't have speed and is getting ready to make it, and Barry, he's going to have his first encounter with the Flash. The Flash is going to know who the guy is, and Thawne's going to be like, "Who the hell are you?"
Well, that's where I always thought we were going, because they kept teasing, they kept demonstrating Thawne's hatred, and then Barry began to hate him too because he kept screwing up his life. But the one thing we never saw is what you said was what set all that off. What was it that initially, because in the comics, Thawne worshipped Barry and Flash was his hero, and then because they took that to the next level with Hunter Zolomon, he decided that Barry actually wasn't worthy. And then Hunter Zolomon thought that only by challenging and breaking Raleigh and taking everything away from him would he actually become a hero, which was a really warped but interesting way to think.
Yeah.
You know, I'm your enemy, but I'm doing you a favor because I'm making you better by breaking you.
I just had a really horrible thought, David.
What was that?
What if the writers are building up this entire Flash ability of super compassion, so that when Barry does meet Thawne for the first time, he knows that, hey, I've done something to make this guy hate me. I'm going to not make him hate me. I'm going to be compassionate to his needs. I'm going to, help whatever it is he's trying to do. He will not become the villain. And so he won't go back in the past and kill my mother, and totally undo everything. Not by speed force, but by love.
Then that means Barry will have completed his transformation into Supergirl.
Yes, he will have.
Because that's what they're doing. I'm not stretching that. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, she's not winning by brute strength anymore. She's winning hearts and minds by talking.
And that's what Barry's always done, but now it's like they personified it in Iris. So in a strange way, because obviously this wasn't the original plan, but the pandemic happened, in a strange way, it's a bit of a reverse WandaVision. It's a bit of a reverse Wanda Maximoff. So Wanda Maximoff, because of grief, found the power to create an illusion, but Iris West Allen, because of love, finds the power to heal and create anything she needs.
Yes.
So yeah, eventually they're going to have Barry, because that's the way he wins a lot of his fights now, is he just talks his way out of them. So I don't know,
Well, because he's never fast enough.
I'm glad that Cisco is still there. I'm glad Caitlin is still there, because if they weren't there, the show would be absolutely unbearable. It's kind of tolerable, barely tolerable, but if it wasn't for Team Flash, if it wasn't for them, it would be absolutely unbearable. And if you notice, I'm actually really glad that you played season so we can get a reminder.
Oh yeah.
Of I'm breaking up.
You broke up there, but I got it. I played the season 1 thing.
Okay. So we could get a reminder of how the show started and where we come from, because if you noticed, especially with this last episode, Cisco's not quippy. Caitlyn's still pretty much Caitlyn, but Caitlyn now is kind of a cipher. She's kind of a host for Frost, but Frost doesn't have her edge anymore.
She's the incredible Horfrost.
Okay. And so
not WHO, but I was trying to say Incredible Hulk. And
I got you. Because Caitlyn hasn't had a love interest since
Ronnie.
What was it, Zoom in season 2?
Oh yeah.
And then Ronnie came back at the beginning of season 2 and then died again. And then she hooked up with Zoom, and then she hasn't really. Killer Frost was clearly in love with Savitar, and so I thought we were finally going to get some type of Snowberry on screen, even if it was the evil twin versions of him, because she clearly had feelings for him and was flirting with him and was kind of making the offer. It's just that he, seemed to be preoccupied with other stuff. But everything about the way they wrote and played that showed that Frost was responding to evil Barry like she loved him. And then my favorite takeaway, which we never got to see from that whole season, was They Bonnie and Clyde at some point, and they went on a crime spree, and they became the top crime couple in Central City, and that's what made the city so bleak until she got caught. But they actually did the thing. They actually became a crime couple, and I'm like, are we ever going to get to see that? But I guess that answer is no too. So
it might not have ever happened now that we had a crisis.
right, because the multiverse has merged, but the multiverse is still in existence, which I thought was really funny that they went to all that trouble to get Barry and Kara on the same Earth, which is really what it was about. But now we have Stargirl and the old JSA and the new JSA, and they're not on Earth 1, but Barry and Supergirl don't know, together or whatever.
They don't know the multiverse reformed,
right,
with the Spectre's help. And
with Oliver Queen Spectre, right?
Yeah. There's a lot that was promised before when all this happened, and we still haven't seen the fallout of it yet. We haven't seen John Diggle with that Green Lantern ring yet, and I don't know where we're going to see that. Yes. Stepping away from the Flash for just a little bit, because there's a whole Arrowverse, which it seems ridiculous to call it that now since there's no Arrow. But there's Superman and Lois, which the episodes I've watched so far have been interesting. They're definitely a post-crisis thing because the Captain Luthor is there, and I'm like, wait a second, Luthor wasn't black the last time I checked, so it's not like the first introduction of him, and it's like, oh, we're going to have a black Luthor. No, that's not John Cryer. And then it becomes very evident that he's a leftover from a parallel Earth that was destroyed in the crisis. But here's the thing: it's 13 years later.
Right.
So, I mean, if we can reference Clark in the Flash, which they did when Barry and Iris were having dinner in the Mirrorverse, and it was the fake Barry, and he's got the whole table set, and he's got funnel cake from Kansas, and he says that was Clark's idea.
Yeah.
So Iris knows Clark, but we can't ever see if we see Superman on the Flash, it's going to be 13-year earlier Superman than what we're seeing on Superman and Lois. And if we ever see the Flash on that show, he's going to be a lot older.
Right.
So they've taken away the crossover potential to be able to have the story of teenage twins.
Right. Well, I knew as soon as we saw that the show was going to be about them, because they always believe, you got to have that young people's element, which isn't true, or you got to have somebody on the show angsting or whatever. But I'm like, Superman doesn't need that because Superman has never needed that. We already had Smallville where he was the angst center of the world. Okay. But he does not need that as a character. But it's the CW way. The CW has always given the main protagonist a team, a posse that turns into a family. Yeah. So what they've given Superman is his actual family, as well as all these other things. But I mean, I can understand them on some level wanting to be reflective of Lois and Clark's status in the comics with John, and the fact that they've been a family a while, and what Superman's like as a dad, and probably because it's new stuff to write for the character. But the challenge or the problem for me is that has never made him more interesting to me. I've never needed him. The most interesting thing in that regard was the way both the comics and Young Justice played his relationship with Connell, with Connor, that he didn't know what to do. He's not really his kid or a kid brother. He's a clone made out of Superman and Luthor. And Clark is like, what am I supposed to do here? Which is a beautiful contrast, because Batman always knows what to do. I'm going to turn you into a bat. That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to train you to fight and observe, and I'm going to teach you to know what I know. So that's not a problem, because he's done that about 10 times now.
Exactly.
10 Robins.
You can do it till you die.
Right. But Clark put in that same situation is like, I don't even know what to say. And so I know a lot of people like that new dimension of Superman because they keep saying that the character was stagnant, which isn't true. So I get what they're going for. It's just that the Man of Steel doesn't need it to be interesting.
Well, every time, Superman's had to deal with a younger protege,
Mm-hmm.
he's always pawned it off on someone else.
Mm-hmm.
When Connor came along, what he finally did, he gave him to his elderly parents and said, "Here, you know what to do with this. I don't know nothing about birthing no babies. Just take this thing." And when Supergirl landed in the Batman Superman, what he do? He pawned her off on Diane. Said, "You know, girls, women folk stuff. take her."
Right.
He's always shirked that responsibility,
Right.
and which is kind of an interesting flaw.
Well, it's ironic that that's the one thing he wouldn't know how to pay forward, because his story has been tweaked over and over again to say that's what makes him him, that it's his time with the Kents.
Yeah.
That's his core. And so out of all the things you would think he'd be able to do, you think he'd be able to mentor as he was mentored, but he's like, nope, not interested. Nope, not equipped. Like, nope, I am. Nope. That these babies, who is it that hates babies? Jean-Luc Picard hated children.
Oh yeah.
Thor doesn't know what to do with babies. Terminators are fascinated by babies, and Superman is like, I'm not in this.
The whole world I can save, but you specifically, I'm not doing anything with.
Right.
So
So
the other thing I'm looking forward to. Oh, by the way, the whole Crisis thing, it gave us a multiverse back, and while it brought Flash and Kara together on the same Earth, it split the Titans and the Doom Patrol onto separate ones. They used to exist on the same Earth, and now they're on two different ones.
right.
I don't know if that's a different Doom Patrol or what, but because I remember, Titan season 1, Gar went to the Doom Patrol. We saw them. They were there. He was a former member. So I'll be interested in seeing what they do with that. But I'm more interested in seeing the second season now of Stargirl, and if they're going to mess it up now that they're away from DC streaming and it's a fully controlled CW production. And I know you've got some thoughts on that because you've seen some preliminary photos.
Yeah. Eclipso is one of the most, I hate to use the word underrated because that word is overused now. I will say underestimated foes in terms of, what he's been able to do when he's fully powered, or how he can hide. He's like the movie Fallen with Denzel.
Yeah.
He can hide inside of a person.
Body. Yeah.
Right. He can body hop. That's right. And so he's a phenomenal character to introduce. But the problem is that they didn't do it with the first season, and I was really, really glad. They had the proper balance between being a superhero in high school and dealing with stakes. But the secret sauce is the same secret sauce that the Flash had, and that was in the first season. It's the veteran actors. It's Jesse L. Martin. It's Tom Cavanaugh. It's John Wesley Shipp. It was his three dads and Michelle Harrison. It's actually the veteran actors in that first season that gives the gravitas necessary to make us fall in love with the world of the Flash. It's the veteran actors. So with Stargirl, it was Luke.
Yeah.
And,
Luke Wilson's awesome in that show.
Oh man, to the point where I was like, wow, but it wouldn't be the same show without him. And so I'm like, you're the one that's the connector between the old JSA and the new JSA, and the point of view character, also a hero yourself, but also observing everything that's going on. The old school secret identity thing about how we got to do what we do in a clandestine kind of way, even though I've got a 20-foot robot in my garage. My wife can't go. Can't tell my wife, don't tell the wife. And so, but he pulled all those hats off so well until that's what gave us, because you won't care if there aren't any stakes. And it's the veteran actors that sell you on stakes in those two shows.
Yeah.
What I'm hoping does not happen is that it degenerates into a mean girl kind of Courtney versus Cindy kind of thing, because
and it already has.
that happens and can happen so easily that I'm like, because I've said it on Twitter. I always secretly hoped, well, it's not a secret, but I always hoped that the mom turns out to be Liberty Bell.
Oh, that would be nice.
And that she had some kind of amnesia. And something happens to wake her up from whatever. Maybe Dr. Fate put a spell on her, but maybe she's the secret weapon. Maybe Dr. Fate took a page out of Batman's book and says, if something ever happens to the JSA, I'm going to create a sleeper agent. I'm going to create somebody that doesn't remember who they are in case we get wiped out. And then something triggers her and it all comes back to her. And all of a sudden, we got a veteran member of the JSA that's a part of the family, that's a part of the action. And because you can't keep teasing the Green Lantern, and we don't see no lantern.
Exactly. Or the pink ink pen that keeps, giggling in the background, and we don't see no Thunderbolt. Right.
We know Thunderbolt is coming, but I'm saying it's those veteran characters that are the more interesting.
Yeah.
When we have the opening scene and we see them all get slaughtered, that was awful, but it was still awesome to see them.
Yeah. And I don't know which ones got slaughtered, because our man didn't get killed there. He got killed later in the car accident with Grundy. And some of the other ones are coming back. John Wesley Shipp is going to be the Flash of Earth 2. I don't know if he's going to be the same Earth 2 Flash that was the Earth 3 Flash on the Flash.
Right.
It would be nice if it were that way. But he died in Crisis, technically. That was the cheapest cop out too, by the way. I mean, 6 years you tease a newspaper headline, Flash disappears in Crisis, and you get to it and you're like, oh, but it wasn't that one.
But I knew that as soon as they said it, because they said Barry Allen must die.
Exactly.
As soon as they said Barry Allen must die, I'm like, okay, well, you talking about Earth 90 or 90s Flash or originally, you ain't talking about Grant Gustin Barry Allen. As soon as they said it that way, I was like, oh, okay, all right, well, we see where this is going.
Yep.
So
another Barry Allen can do this.
So Stargirl still has the most potential to give us the JSA show we've always wanted. They've teased it, they've hinted at it, and I still maintain that, first of all, they're interesting enough to carry something on their own, but second of all, you can't care about the 2021 JSA if you don't know about the originals. The original Wildcat is what gives Yolanda the mantle and the weight and understanding the character. Definitely the original Owlman, because I love Owlman. He's such a quirky, funny, golden age, silver age, doesn't make any sense character, but it's fun to watch, and I love that costume. But I mean, and again, the Lanterns, if we get Alan Scott like we're supposed to. But I'm saying it's them holding it down in World War II that gives any kind of weight to their replacements trying to hold it down now. Without that context, they're just more kids with powers. And on top of all that, I won't go so far as to say that Courtney's a Mary Sue, but Courtney's a sort of Sue. Because
she's very chipper.
No, it's not a personality.
She's a Pollyanna.
There's no explanation for how she combines her gymnastics with the staff with no training.
Yeah.
And she's actually come up with her own form of martial arts, and she's mastered it. So she can ride on the staff like a broom. We call that, in my other podcast, we call it flippity foo. So she can do all this wire work stuff, and she can shoot the energy bolts and all that different kind of stuff. And there was no growth arc.
Yeah. I don't think they have time for the lead character to have a kind of a growth arc like that when they've got so many villains running around and so many characters that they're going to introduce. I mean, this was basically building up JSA Junior the whole time. I love your idea of her mom being Liberty Bell, and that would definitely tie into Sylvester Pemberton being involved with her. But the thing that's the part that I don't know if I like or not. There's still this idea that Sylvester Pemberton is supposed to be Courtney's dad. We know that Sylvester Pemberton is back. We saw him at the end of last season, checking in. So we know we're going to see him. But we know that the guy that we saw show up and try to scam the family was Courtney's father, according to her mother. We think.
Well,
We think.
well, yeah, but I mean, at least she admitted that she had her bad boy phase, and Courtney's a result of that, and she's not proud of it, but it kind of is what it is. That was very human, and that was actually the most poignant scene out of the whole season for me. Her having to face the harsh reality that Starman wasn't her dad, and this jerk is her dad, and it's something that her mother regrets. And so it kind of burst her bubble in a very real world kind of way. All of her, I'm the daughter of a superhero, because that type of giddiness is relatable. It's, Brecht does a great job of selling it, because anybody would feel that way in that same situation. So, but what we're thinking now, since Starman is back, is that, well, maybe not, but that would have to mean they hooked up, and does she not remember, or does she not want to admit it, or is there some kind of spooky DNA magic going on? So they're going to have to do a mighty retcon. Why did they bring, like, what's the point of that,
Yeah, either
So,
she's been made to forget it for a reason, for some spooky magic reason, or the only other alternative is that Starman's a jerk. he loves him and leaves him.
well, they tried to do the same thing with Superman and Lois, and it was done so poorly until they didn't really realize they created a bunch of stupid situations, because Superman Returns couldn't make up its mind as to what it was, if it was a sequel, a reboot, or a remake. So it tried to be all three, and it didn't succeed in any of the three. But if we're picking up from the Reeve Kidder universe, somehow they forgot that Superman gave her a magic forgetto kiss
Yeah,
and made her forget, which is, again, it's Silver Age. I keep trying to tell people, you have to understand that movie is a Silver Age movie. It's not
super hypnosis.
right, because he made her forget specific events she said was happening in the world. She forgot the whole Zod everything, which means the world around her would be recovering, and Lois would be like, recovering from what?
Yeah,
And it also means that she would not remember sleeping with Clark in the fortress, so she would just wake up one day and discover she's pregnant. How am I pregnant?
yeah, exactly.
So it creates so many problems. And then casting Kate Bosworth, Reeve and Kidder were clearly Superman and Lois in their 30s, somewhere at 30 or early 30s. Clearly, there were not 20s versions. Then you cast Kate Bosworth with a 5-year-old kid. So she would have had to have that child when she was 18, given that character. And I'm like, so anyway, so I'm saying all that to say, I hope they don't do that kind of wonky, nonsensical, creating paradoxes thing with Starman.
I hope not either. Looking forward into the new season now that the whole Stargirl family knows the secret, they're all in on it. They're Team Stargirl now.
Yeah.
And you've already mentioned how her mom might be Liberty Bell. Do you think that, given that we've heard the name Jakeem a couple of times now as being one of Mike's friends at school, that they're going to subvert that expectation and Mike is going to get the powerful ink pen, or is he going to become some other JSA character or not become a JSA character at all? I mean, he's going to want to do it, obviously. He says, this is the family business. I should be costumed. I should be carrying on the tradition. That's what I would do if I was his age. And, my sister and my stepdad were former heroes, or my dad, that's his real dad. Yeah.
Well, if they give him some identity, it probably won't be the Thunderbolt, because they're not going to Can you imagine the outrage if they replace African American character with a Caucasian character? So I really don't think they're going to do that. I really think we're going to see Jakeem take the Thunderbolt and go from there. But what they could do in a twist, even though I'm giving them too much credit by saying this, but what they could do in a twist is make them share the Thunderbolt.
Yeah.
Now that would be something where you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you get the kid with the genie, but you get Jakeem with the genie, and maybe they change the rules to where the genie can actually bond with both of them at the same time, or they do a Firestorm style merge.
Ooh.
And they become kind of joined together in a you're in my head, I'm in your head kind of way, which would be comedy gold to have those kids, warring over a personality or whatever. So I'm saying there's ways, to do that, creative ways to do that. But I'm giving them too much credit by suggesting all that.
Yeah, I'm thinking Mike is probably going to end up with one of the other identities. And, I can't imagine, Stripesy wanting his son out there without any powers, unprotected like that. So if he has something to go out with, it's going to be one of the most protective things that there is. And that would be like a Green Lantern.
I was going to say, you sound like you're talking about a lantern ring. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my goodness, Teen Lantern.
No, not Teen Lantern. No, they finally made that a thing. That was years ago. People were clamoring for, give us Teen Lantern in the. I was like, no, the Owens would never do that. But and now we've got one. Thank you, Brian Michael Bendis.
Right.
Real quick, is there anything we want to wrap up with that we're looking forward to on CW shows coming up here with the Flash and the Arrowverse in general? Batwoman. Is anything to be said about that?
No, they're going to cancel that, and it's about time. The only thing I will say is that, Javicia kind of inherited a mess.
Yeah, she did.
So there was no way. Sometimes, things can't be salvaged.
I thought they were going to give her superpowers with that kryptonite bullet in her.
Yeah, well, they still might. But, the only thing I personally would want to see is some type of consistency with the multiverse thing, because I love the crossovers, but if you're going to put Barry and Kara in the same space, we need to see more of Barry and Kara in action. And I said it before, I really think they maxed with the last Crisis.
Yeah.
We got Burt Ward, we had the Birds of Prey, we had everything that's ever been a part of DC in film and TV in that last Crisis. So I'm trying to understand where they could go from there. So, but I think they maxed out. I think, because a lot of these shows are just, they jumped the shark a long time ago in terms of they're not innovating, they're not challenging.
Well, the next big thing that came after Crisis was Final Night. And that was where the sun was going out. And remember what reignited the sun was Green Lantern.
Right.
So they could bring John Stewart in for that. I know you got to go. It's top of the hour here. So, David, this has been fun. I always love talking with the superhero shows with you. We have to do this again real soon before the seasons are over. Maybe when Stargirl finally launches, we'll talk about that again.
Cool. Thanks for having me, man. This was great. I really loved it.
Thanks for coming on the show. Everybody tune in to Flash Chat, the fastest hour on podcasting. Hit the link in the description above and go out and sub to Dave's channel. Thanks for coming to the show.